first thing, make sure you're back here. You all heard me, right? But you all coming in now, you're gonna wanna get a similar vantage point to what I have here. So I'm focusing in on these three figures. I put one of these benches in front, and then I went and got a picture just so I could have something that would be small enough that I could measure that against other things, right? So the first thing you're gonna do is use your viewfinder. And this is really helpful when you're trying to figure out what you're gonna draw. If you're gonna build a still life upstairs, build the still life, but then use your viewfinder to decide how close or how far away you want this to be, right? So it's important that you get all of the objects within, okay? It's all right, you know, if they extend on either side, but for this exercise, it's best if you can try to keep them in here. And when you do this, just like pencil sighting, you want it all the way stretched out, right? And so, again, because I'm a right-hander, I always keep this on this side, right? That way I don't have to move back and forth. The first thing that I'm gonna do is figure out a good central vantage point for this, okay? And that's gonna help you with referencing. So when I'm looking at my structure here, I'm kind of liking this kneeling figure right here. Kind of wanting to put that crosshair right up on the very corner, because that helps me with kind of a rule of thirds happening with the other stuff over here, right? So if I know that that's where my vantage point's gonna be, I'm gonna go ahead and sketch out just really lightly and really cleanly a good border for myself so that I can get that to correspond with my viewfinder. And so sometimes I'll sketch that out and then I'll bring my viewfinder close to that so I can get a good feel for where I'm gonna put those marks. And again, we wanna draw like we have been in the first couple of weeks, where we're not pinch or grasping, right? You wanna be pointing and you wanna be working out here with a light hand, because we don't wanna have to erase right away. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna decide which of these things are gonna be my basic units of measure. So just looking at my composition, what do you feel like would be an easy basic unit of measure for me to look at and compare to the rest? So that's why I went and got it, right? Because I was looking at that little bench thing and I couldn't get that to easily match up with other stuff. I mean, at first I was measuring the height of that and I was like, okay, I can get 2 1/8 of that on the tall structure, but that's too hard for me to really, you want to simplify your fractions, right? So what I discovered there with that vase, it's about 5.5 heads tall here, okay? It's a little bigger than a normal head, so that's what I'm gonna use. So the first thing I'm gonna do is figure out where in my picture plane I'm gonna place that. So what I'm seeing in my picture plane is that exists roughly right here, okay? So placing that over here and having that sort of that crosshair in the area that I want it, I'm gonna create some limitations for myself for how tall I want that little piece to be. Sometimes I'm looking at the space around it, like the negative space, like how far from this border and this border is that little element, that basic unit of measure. Thinking about negative space can be very helpful. Once you basically kind of have that worked in, since I'm measuring that height, then I can start thinking about how big these other things ought to be in comparison with how big I've made this. So it doesn't really matter how big I've made this, right? As long as everything else corresponds with this. And we can make the bigger decisions later with larger paper. So we're gonna go real loose with that to start with. So looking back a little bit, and I'm closing my eye when I do this to kind of like create shape rather than volume. If I were to draw a grid line straight across where the bottom of that vase is, and I come up and I draw a grid line straight across the top of it, there's a very convenient latitudinal line there where her feet kind of like start to go away. Right? Her feet go up into her ankles as such in that point. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create kind of like a little hash mark for myself that says, okay, well, this is my vase, or where it should be. And this is about where those feet are gonna start. Okay, and because she's over here somewhere, I'm just gonna go ahead and give myself a really basic gesture there. I don't wanna make it look like a figure just yet. So once I kind of have that marked out, then what I'm gonna do is decide how tall this should be, because I've already said, okay, it's gonna start here, right? This is the size of this. I need to figure out 5.5 now. Because when I looked at that and measured it and moved up, it worked out for that. So now I'm gonna do this, right? I'm gonna go, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5. Just so happens that I was kind of perceiving that, right? So that's about how tall that should be. Notice I'm not worried about articulating anything. I'm just getting proportions first, okay? So next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and kind of box in that kneeling structure. And because the way I lined it up, my kneeling structure is in here, I'm gonna use my hash mark in here to help with that, okay? So the reason I put it right, like her head right in that corner, so that I could easily have a point of reference where I can stick that. And then her body pretty much goes straight down here, and it kind of goes into this area here. But now I have to do a little bit of pencil sighting to figure out, you know, how big should that bench thing be compared to my basic unit of measure. So I'm going to check that out again. I always have to go back to measure it. And then I'm going to go from the bottom, 1, 2, 2.5. So again, I'm going to figure out like a base for that. Again, drawing across the bottom, they're pretty close. So if this is the bottom of this, I just need to move up a little bit over here to figure out where the bottom of that bench is going to be. And because I said, what, 2.5, right? Is that correct? Keeping a lot of numbers in my head. Now I'm going to go like 1, 2.5. So this is about how big it should be. So now what I'm going to do is look and compare, okay? How much of my figure can I see that's sticking out behind that? If that looks like I have about the same amount of space, that's going to work for me, no problem. Next thing, I'm going to move over to this other structure. So my third figure over here. I'm going to take a look at where that exists in this quadrant, and I'm going to give a really basic gesture for that. So seeing that that sort of exists out here, I'm just going to kind of gesture my figure really simply. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out that latitude line. So I'm going to kind of look at the buttocks and the feet, and there's kind of like a tilt to that. Luckily, the feet are placed at the same location. So I already have my feet here. I just got to move that over. The buttocks come up just a little bit here. Now I'm going to go ahead and do some measurement. I lose my viewfinder as soon as I have significant imagery on here. And then once I have all my stuff sort of portioned out, that's when I start looking at like, okay, how am I going to create this structure and make it look exactly like what I'm, you know, looking at. So, so I'm kind of going along the diagonal of her body here, just because I like to, anytime I'm using something figurative, I like to go along with the spine as much as possible. So 1, 2, and about 2.5 there. So what I like to do when I'm looking for some kind of an angle is I'll line something up like a finger like this, and then I'll bring my hand over like that. And I'll see if that gesture kind of looks similar, and it does. So now I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, well, that's where the buttocks hit the bottom. I'm going to go 1, 2.5. Again, this is something I've done for a lot of time, a long time. And so there's a lot of these things that just happen to work out for me, right? And this will be like automatic for you eventually. So now that I have this, now I'm going to move into some shape analysis and start to actually sketch out what I see there. I'm going to worry about each object independently before I even start worrying about contours and cleaning things up. I never really made this vase thingy look like a vase, so I'm going to try to clean that contour up a little bit from my gesture, and then I'll go in and make stuff look more correct. Widths, if you feel like widths are a problem, like if something looks like it's too wide, it probably is. Trust your judgment. As artists, we have good visual understanding of things. So if it looks wrong, there's something in your brain's telling you, yeah, there's something going on with this, I need to fix it. So reevaluate, remeasure if you need to. But when you're making your still life or you're selecting your stuff, keep it simple for now. Try to find things that would be easy for you to work one into the other. We probably don't want to go for super deep space right now. It's about where the knees are. This kind of goes up to the hip area. Again, I'm just kind of getting a basic sketch going on this. The hands kind of come in this location. The shoulders are going to be about right here. The head's kind of cut this way. Shoulders are going to kind of come down, around, into the body, down, around, into the body. Put a little bit of bulk there for the breast area. Okay, so I've got a pretty good schematic going now. What the next step is to use your eraser, clean up all the planning marks, right? And then go for higher fidelity to what you're seeing, and then begin shading, okay? Does that kind of make sense? It's a lot. It's a lot of steps all at once, right? But if you start with your basic unit of measure first, then you look at your compositional lineup to get everything in your picture plane, and then just go one piece at a time, right? Measure all those things out. And if you start with that latitudinal idea, like again, thinking about it like you have a grid right in front of you, right? Kind of imagining where those lines would all go. Like you all are kind of like standing at a very similar area. I can look at Bree's feet are about here. I kind of go back and I get the next like Lexus Sadie thing going on. Like I can look at how things recede in space by looking at where they line up laterally, right? Okay, if you intend to do a drawing somewhere out in here somewhere, right? Yeah. Try to look for some things like these sculptures or something interesting like that. And then make sure you've got other things that you can compare to. If you need to bring stuff from the back room, bring it out. That's cool with me. We probably won't get too much further than to the point to where we're cleaning these up today. So before you leave, I want you to take a high fidelity photograph with your phone of your subject so that we can look at and compare the two on Wednesday, right? Took a long time to get through that demo and all that stuff. So if you want to set up a still life upstairs, just don't take a lot of time doing it. Groups of 4 kind of thing. Make it simple, tall stuff, medium stuff, short stuff.